Welcome to Surthrival, the podcast about befriending grief. I'm your host, Stacia Gaines. We're back in this episode talking to Meesha Emmett, who is the area director for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the Alabama chapter. In the last episode, we talked a lot about prevention. And before I go further, let me just again say that this episode is about suicide, and this can be triggering to listeners. The idea is to help people, particularly in this episode, who have been suicide survivors. But if this is something that is too tough for you to listen to right now, or there may be small children listening, just be forewarned that that's what this episode is about. So again, in the last episode, we really talked more about prevention, and we shared some statistics around how common, unfortunately, suicide ideation is, and the staggering numbers of how many people die by suicide each year. And in this episode, we're really going to focus on the suicide bereaved, or the suicide survivors, those left behind when someone that they loved took their life. And Meesha, you pointed out to me earlier that this is not just family members, but this could also be, as in your case, a close friend or a classmate or a bandmate, whatever. It's just anyone that you've had a relationship with and lost by suicide. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. It's anyone in your life that you've lost to suicide.
Okay. So one of the things that I have said in Surthrival since the very beginning, no two people, no matter how similar they are or similar the circumstances, no two people grieve the same. It has never been my intention in this podcast to be preachy or prescriptive or to be some kind of expert on grief. My goal, my sole goal in this podcast is to help those who have suffered loss find healthy ways to grieve. And there are plenty of unhealthy ways, and we've talked about those. You can drink too much. You can eat too much. You can shop too much. You can just not even acknowledge that you're grieving. You can just pretend like it doesn't happen. You can overwork. There's many ways you can ignore your grief. But I can tell you that grief will not be ignored. It will not. If you don't deal with it, it will deal with you. It will ooze out of you in ways that are unhealthy and gross. You'll have physical ramifications, emotional ramifications. So the whole purpose of Surthrival is to help people grieve in healthy ways. So we talk about stuff. And unfortunately, one of the ways that some of us, our grief has been through losing someone through suicide. And Meesha, let's just talk a little bit. Suicide is probably one of the most, if not the most, complicated, complex griefs that exist. Talk about some of those reasons why it's so difficult.
Well, suicide itself is such a taboo issue. It's not something that we talk about if it happens. It's a lot of closed conversations. If you're a survivor of suicide loss, it changes everything. It changes how you interact with the world. It changes how those in the world interact with you. It can bring on thoughts of shame and feeling guilty and a lot of intrusive thoughts, right? It's just so complex. Any grief is traumatic in and of itself. But suicide, because of all of those things that I just mentioned, It's just different. So let's take a support group, right? If you go to a support group, oftentimes the focus of the support group is based on the loss. So I could go to a support group with other individuals who have lost their friends. But losing a friend in a car accident or to a terminal illness or to any illness, while also very tragic in its own right, it's not the same.
Right.
That person would be less likely to get those awkward reactions and kind of the whispers and things like that that family and friends of those who die by suicide have to endure. It's
You know
just
what? That is so interesting that you say that, because I actually went to a grief group for 3 or 4 weeks. I ended up quitting the group because I could not relate to the other's grief. And it was interesting. It made me angry. So when you have somebody in the group, and I'm not diminishing their grief, they are grieving. I'm not saying that my grief is greater than your. But to have someone in the group talk constantly about losing their 88-year-old father, and they're sitting by the bedside, and he quietly passes and transitions to heaven. Like, I found myself just getting mad, and I realized, okay, I need to leave this group because they have every right to grieve the loss of their father, their aged father. This is more about me, but I found I couldn't relate, and I got mad.
I think that's that reaction, that response it's a human one, first of all, and it's completely valid. But like you're experiencing the grieving process for someone that's suicide bereaved is still the same. And at our core, all of us want to be seen. And in vulnerable spaces like a support group, that takes a lot to even walk through the door. The hope is that you'll find connection with someone. But that's why there are support groups focused specifically. They're called SOS groups, survivors of suicide loss,
Uh,
because the
SOS
grief
groups.
is so different.
Yeah. It's very multi-layered, isn't it? And there's also often an element of trauma. For me, fortunately, my husband took his life away from home. I did not find his body. I did not ever see his body in the state that it was in, but I know of so many people who've been present in the space where it happened, or they have found the person. And I cannot imagine the trauma that is added to the grief.
Yeah, that's complicated grief, complex grief.
Yeah.
Yeah, layer on layer, the loss itself, and then the circumstances surrounding the loss. Each one adds its own unique layer.
Yeah, and some of the other things that I think affect the maybe your feelings in your grief, or what the relationship with that person was. Were they, familiar relationship with your husband or your child? Were they a friend? Were they a colleague? Yeah, so that kind of relationship. But then, like, how deep was the relationship, and was it good at the time that they died? Were you estranged from them, which could add another complication. I wish I had called them more. I wish I had known that they were feeling this. So those can bring additional layers of complication to your grief.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
I feel very fortunate in that I was personally dealing with some other difficult circumstances in my life before Matt's death, where I chose to seek out a therapist through my company's employee assistance program. And I'll just do kind of a plug here. If you are working for a company and they offer employee assistance program counseling, and you're feeling any kind of way, I just encourage you, take advantage of it. It is confidential. Most of the time it's free, and I thank God that I was having these other issues that led me to my therapist, who I'm still seeing to this day. I will talk to her on Wednesday, and I'm so thankful for her. So what I the reason I say that is I was already seeing a therapist, and I have a video call with her. It's not even I've never met her face to face other than through video. But she and I guess we had a couple of sessions about these other issues that were bugging me. And then one day, I guess it was session 3 or 4, when I knew I could trust her, I said, "These aren't my problems at all. Here are my problems." And we talked about, my concerns about Matt. And she really helped me looking at that potential anticipatory grief, looking at what I could do and what I couldn't do. And one of the things that really helped me is she said from the very beginning, she said, "You have no control over whether your husband decides to take his life. That is his choice. You cannot control it." And whereas that was hard, it's true. So I had maybe less guilt and blame than others because I had that help from a trusted therapist. And then I also kind of took an approach where I decided, knowing that I could not prevent Matt from taking his life, I looked at the things that I could control. And as we talk about circles of control, that circle in the middle, that's really the only control you have. And that's what we say, how we respond, what we do, what we think, the stories we tell ourselves. That is the only thing we truly have control over. And if you haven't read the book Let Them by Mel Robbins, totally encourage you to read that book. And she actually talks about mental health situations. But outside that circle of self-control is the circle of influence. And so in that circle of influence, I tried to do the things that I felt were supportive of Matt. I just made sure that he knew how much I loved him, and I was specific in sharing what I loved and appreciated about him. But it was not done in the spirit of control and preventing and trying to fix him. It was done purely out of love and wanting to make sure that he knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I loved him deeply and I valued him. And so I guess if you're a person who is suicide bereaved, two pieces of advice: find a trusted counselor that you can really talk to about the feelings, because they're deep. But number two, just realize no matter how close you are to the person or were to the person, you have limited control over their actions. So, what do you have to add to that, Meesha?
I think that realizing I think it's like what people say. This being a suicide loss survivor, it's important that the focus is on today forward. From that moment forward, not worrying so much about what was,
Right.
because that can again add those layers as well. So focusing on what is, what's ahead, your healing journey.
Yes.
It's a natural thing for for us to kind of get into our own heads about every specific detail and replaying, but as much as we can minimize that and keep the focus on what is,
That's good.
and focus on healing. No healing journey is linear. It looks
Correct.
different for everybody. Grieving is it's not a one day, it's not a few weeks and then you're done. It's something that you just become accustomed to, and it looks different every day. But focusing on healing, I think, is very important after experiencing a suicide loss. At our Out of the Darkness community walks, I talk to our participants about we hold space for everyone to say the name of the person that they lost and love, because so often with any loss, but particularly with suicide, people say the names less and less and less, and a lot of it is well intentioned, right? People don't want to
Right.
upset us or activate us, and it's like it's upsetting when you don't say their name. So
Right.
it's up to us to shift the focus to the way that our loved ones lived instead of the circumstances around their death.
Yes.
And that is a huge, huge, huge part of healing in most cases. For me, it certainly was. Like I said, the grief was debilitating, but then it's like I sprung into action, figuring out what I could do to make sure that the loss of Alex was not in vain, and to do all that I could to keep another person or another family from having to experience a similar loss. So,
Yeah. So the year after Matt died, my daughter and her husband and my granddaughter and another friend, we participated in Walk to Prevent Suicide. Talk about what one of those events is like, Meesha.
So we, AFSP, we host Out of the Darkness campus and community walks across the country each year. The community walks take place in the fall, the campus walks in the spring. And so they are a place for, loss survivors, those with lived experience, and just any supporter of the cause, really, to come together in community with other loss survivors, supporters, and those with lived experience to raise awareness, to show people that they're not alone, that there's a community of people that understand. To me, that's one of the most beautiful things about the work that we do with AFSP, is providing these opportunities for people to connect with other people who've had similar life journeys. Though each situation is unique, each healing journey is different, there's something really powerful about seeing someone else wearing the same honor bead color, so right away without a word spoken that they've experienced the same loss as you.
Talk about those honor beads.
At each walk, we have what are called honor beads. They're just strands of beads, different colors, and each color represents a different loss type. So personally, I wear the purple bead. The purple bead symbolizes the loss of a friend. I wear the teal bead. The teal bead is because I know people that struggle with mental illness. I wear the green bead because I myself have had my own mental health struggles. And then I wear the blue bead, which is supporting the cause of suicide prevention. There are also beads that signify the loss of a spouse, the loss of a sibling, the loss of a parent, the loss of a military veteran or first responder, supporting the LGBTQ plus community, and so on. So it's so powerful because all close to 1,000 strangers gathering together, and everyone is wearing a bead that signifies their loss. You can find your community without a single word being uttered. And suicide, grief related to suicide, is so complex, and it can be so isolating.
Yeah.
Because you don't want, even though it's your loss, it's like there's a part of us that doesn't want other people to feel uncomfortable. So sometimes that can make us feel like it's easier just to not engage, which makes that healing process even more challenging. So
Yeah.
our walks,
That's kind of the shame aspect of it,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, a lot of people worry about the public perception. We don't want people to think differently of us or our loved one's family or of them. That's
Right.
why I said shifting the focus from the circumstances surrounding their death to the full lives that they led and what can be done to prevent this from happening to someone else. It's very important.
Yeah. Um, some so doing the walk, some of the things that I remember were the shoes. If I recall, they had to do with the age, like how many people had died by suicide in the state of Alabama based on their ages. Is that right?
There are different statistic signs throughout the walk. The shoes just represent the lives lost.
Lives
The
lost.
suicide. There's data that tracks how many people in each age group died in the past year.
Yeah.
The shoes are
That
powerful.
was very sobering, but just seeing babies and children and dogs and people like my family, we had a sign honoring Matt that I carried, and then we also had a sign along the walk that honored him.
Mm-hmm.
Just, just back to what you said maybe in the last podcast about speak their name, remember them. So that it was a very moving time. And it's also a way to raise money.
It's our largest revenue generating event. You know, with AFSP, we're the largest private funder of suicide prevention research globally, and funds raised at things like the campus and community walks are how we fund that research, and the research is what saves lives. Um, Obviously, there's no price to be put on a life or a
Even
loss.
one life, yeah.
Correct. It's the research. There's an investment necessary to get this research done, and so that's what all of those proceeds go to. And I'm very proud to be an employee of an organization invests so much in research that it has proven to be life saving and life changing. But those walks are very powerful. The walks are the entry point into this world for a lot of people, just to see it. Because you can hear a lot of things and they sound good, but there's nothing like pulling up and seeing all of these people and just really feeling in that moment that you are not alone and that everybody out here has a connection to you in some way, whether it's through your loss, your belief in this organization and our mission, or just personal struggles, right? The connectedness is very important. Another thing that I don't feel like enough people know about, AFSP has something called healing conversations. And so that's when individuals who are suicide bereaved, and that loss could have been a week ago, a month ago, 12 years ago, individuals can reach out and request a conversation with a volunteer, and our amazing, amazing loss and healing team then connects that individual with a volunteer in that same state, if they can, whose loss reflects their own. So I would be able to speak to a female in Alabama who also lost her best friend, someone who truly understands what my journey has been like. And that's extremely powerful. Just someone who gets it, right? It's not like, yeah, I lost my grandmother too, but the circumstances were probably different. And so healing conversations, it's very, very instrumental in the healing of lots of families and individuals. So I strongly encourage, in addition to things like you've mentioned, participating in those employee assistance programs, finding a therapist or counselor, and then participating in a healing conversation, just so that you can see that there are other people out there who understand what you're going through and can offer insight. Additionally, we have countless resources, so those are always available. And I mentioned on the last episode, just reaching out to us via our chapter page at afsp.org/Alabama. We're always happy to help and provide resources.
It's very ironic. I'm a very authentic out there. person. I don't mind talking about pretty much anything, and that's a blessing and a curse at times. But what I have found is that talking with others is very healing for me. Helping others who've been through something similar is very therapeutic. And I even yesterday, I had someone reach out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, I've lost your number, but would you talk to a friend of mine?" And this friend of hers had also lost her husband
Mm,
by suicide. I said, absolutely. She said, I know you're busy. And I'm like, no, that is the most important thing that I can do
absolutely.
is just listen to somebody else who is hurting. The irony is that really it has been a big part of my healing to listen and care for others who are on a similar journey.
Helping is a big part of healing.
It is. It's kind of crazy. So if you're hurting and you're kind of down the road, help somebody else. It's kind of miraculous how it helps. This podcast is an example of that. I took something just really horrific and awful, and I didn't do it the first or second year, but I've been able to, through my writing and through my journaling, just do this, and it's been very healing and therapeutic for me just to share with you, the listeners.
Yeah, like again, I will say it a billion times over. You never know whose healing is connected to your own. And I see examples of that every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also, we talked earlier about support groups and things like that. There are support groups in across the state that are specific to suicide survivors. So I will be sure to give you that information to include in the show notes.
One other thing that I did want to mention, I have talked a great deal on this podcast about the power of journaling, and whether that's words or drawing or art or music or whatever creative way. One of the things that was very helpful to me is it's very common after someone dies by suicide for your brain to just get stuck in loops of what if? What if I had never said this? What if we had done this? What if I had said this? What if I had called them more often? I've had so many of Matt's friends who have said to me, gosh, I wish I'd known he was like, I wish. And to your point, Meesha, you can't go back. The person is no longer with us. You can only move forward. So something that I would encourage is when you're having those thoughts, and this is something I did, is I was at the beach and it was early days, and I just kept having those what if, or if I had only, or was it this, was it that? And that was just so counterproductive because, I mean, Matt was gone, but I was still processing all that. And I do think it's important to process it, that not to suppress it. You do need to think through those things and ask those questions. But one of the things I felt very impressed to do by the Lord was I had my journal. I can still see where I was sitting or lying by the pool. And the Lord told me, He said, okay, Stacia, you're ruminating. So I want you to write down every single what if, every single question you've had. Should I have said this? Should I have not said that? Whatever it is, write it down. And then after you've written it all down, then you are not to pick it up again because it's not your fault. And so if you still spend a lot of time ruminating on, I wonder if this was it, I wonder if it was my fault, just know that, you know, maybe you did make some mistakes, but it's not your fault. One other thing that I just thought about that I really want to tell everybody with suicide, death by suicide, there's a lot of why, 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 and that's kind of related to the what ifs and if I had only blah blah blah, but the why and something that I read by Kurt Cobain's aunt, who also had attempted suicide, really freed me. She said that people who attempt suicide, they are so at the bottom of their, they're at the bottom. They see no hope. And I think those of us who are the bereaved, we think, oh, but there's this and there's that. And how could one of the things that I said so frequently in the early days, I would get so angry and I would just scream out, how could you leave me? How could you leave me? And there's a feeling of abandonment. Like, I needed you. How could you think that taking your own life would leave me better off? And in the book, she says that because of where they are, because of what they truly believe, even though it's not true, they tell themselves that those that are left behind will be better off without them. I think they know that it will be hard initially, but they feel so worthless by the time that happens that they truly believe we'll be better off. And so that book is also on my website, and it was really helpful to me in the why, especially when I had those feelings of deep abandonment.
Yes. So she's correct in that. And I just say this to offer just some clarity for your listeners. Like, suicide is never the, it's never because of just one thing, right? It's never what we, the public, see, right? The public sees a loss and knows that, you know, Jimmy over here lost his job, and then a suicide happens. So our assumption is that it happened because of that. But there's always
Right.
environmental, psychological, a lot of historical factors at play underneath the surface that we have no idea about. That's why when you're at that point in your healing journey, this understanding the education piece is so critically important because it does relieve you of a lot of those feelings of guilt that people might be carrying around. Education is such an important part for that reason. And so I think you were in a session that I gave this example in. If you think about the most painful moment of your life, you would not be unable in that moment, the most painful thing you've ever been through, physically painful, you would not be able to give me, a stranger, crystal clear directions to get to your home. Something that we do multiple times a day, sometimes we don't even think about it. That is that's the level of intensity. It's just like that constant pain. It's like a horse with blinders on, and it's just an intense pain. And in that moment, similar to the most painful moment that we've all called to mind, you just want the pain to be over.
Right.
These individuals do not want to die. That gets heavy. I am a person, like I mentioned earlier, with my own lived experience. It's there really are no words to put into how heavy that can get. And in that moment, in that intense moment, you aren't able to tap into your critical thinking skills, your reasoning skills that you would in your when all things are as they should be, when you're feeling balanced. In that moment, all you can focus on is that intense pain. And so when all of those biological, environmental, and physiological factors combine, they're all happening at the same time, and then there's then there's a stressor or life event, there's access to lethal means, that's what often results in a suicide. But I say that to say it's never just one thing.
That's important to say.
It's so important. It's never just one thing. And there are people who, unfortunately, do die by suicide that maybe their mental health condition did not get diagnosed. But again, it's never the one thing. Those life stressors or those stressors or life events happen, and they exacerbate all of the other things that are constantly just right there beneath the surface. And the access to lethal means is what all those things oftentimes result in a suicide. And I just pray that if you're listening and you have experienced a loss, that brings you some type of comfort to know, to the point that was made earlier, some things are just beyond our control. And having those things like family histories of mental illness, their own personal diagnoses, maybe they have some chronic pain issues. There's a lot happening that you couldn't control if you tried.
Yeah.
Right? And I hope that gives anyone listening that carries around, who may have been carrying around those feelings of guilt, I hope that brings you some comfort and peace in knowing that. I know it doesn't make the loss any less painful, but just having a better understanding of how this happens. And again, it's today forward. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And if you're listening and you're struggling, know that there is help available. Know that there are people who need you here tomorrow.
Yes. Oh, that's really powerful, Meesha. Yeah, this was an emotional one for me. I knew it would be, but our goal is to help people grieve in healthy ways, and tears are one of those healthy ways.
They are.
So I would say that personally, it's my passion and purpose in life to help those who are grieving, and I have a particular and special place in my heart for those who have this complicated and ugly type of grief. So I'm also available. Feel free to email me, write me, send me something from my website, www.surthrivalpodcast.com, and I'm happy to talk to anyone, or really to just listen to you. It truly does help to have somebody that cares. So do not suffer alone. Do not suffer in silence. There are people that are here for you.
Absolutely.
So Meesha Emmett, I can't thank you enough. I've looked forward to this day for a long time. Thank you for all you do for our state and for those of us who are suicide bereaved. Thank you for your intelligence and your passion, and for sharing your story with us and the resources that your organization provides.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Like I said, education is such an important part of prevention. So if you'd like to schedule a training for any of the groups I mentioned before, if you'd just like to learn more, if you've had a loss, don't know what to do now, afsp.org/Alabama. I'm a certified grief educator. I'm a human that just cares, and I just don't want people to suffer alone, because I've been there and it's hard. But there is hope.
There is hope. There is always hope. So, thank you, listener, for joining into this tough conversation, this taboo topic. I put it off for a good long while, but it's an important topic, and it's one that we need to talk about, because that's the only way that we can prevent it, is by talking about it and making sure people don't feel like they're alone. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Meesha.
Thank you.